Hey, sleepy listener. Welcome to Sleeping Podcast. Where in the world are you listening from? Let us know in the comments. And if you're ready to drift off, like and subscribe. And let's begin.
Let me tell you about the night I first saw the whale who carried the night across the sea. It was not an evening filled with wonders or loud stories, not the kind of night that arrives in sudden brilliance. It was quiet, tender, almost shy, in the way it unfolded, as though the world wished only to place a hand on my shoulder and remind me of the softness of being alive. I remember the air first, the way it cooled slowly, as if every particle of light and warmth had learned to bow, to bend, to slip gently into rest. The heat of the day still lingered faintly in the stones at my feet, but the breeze carried away what remained, replacing it with a freshness that touched my skin like a calm sigh. Each inhalation drew the salt of the sea into my chest, and each exhalation left me lighter, more still, more open. Before me stretched the ocean, endless and patient, breathing in its own rhythm. The waves moved as if guided by a hidden pulse, advancing, retreating, never hurried, never uncertain. The water shifted its colors with the fading sun, no longer the bright blues of day, but something gentler, something deeper, as though the sea was wrapping itself in a soft shawl of dusk. Silver began to bloom on its surface, threads of light spun across rippling water, and the horizon blurred into a quiet gradient of blue and lavender. The sky followed the sea's example. Daylight thinned, loosened, dissolved into softness. At first, there was the faintest blush along the edge of the world, and then, gradually, it melted into indigo, a shade so slow and serene it seemed to hush the mind into silence. The last traces of sunlight clung to the edges of clouds, making them glow faintly before surrendering to darkness. There was no hurry, no sharp shift, just the gradual unfurling of shadow. Like a veil being drawn across the heavens, I stood there in the hush of it all, feeling very small and very safe. The shore beneath my feet was cool, grains of sand sliding gently between my toes. Each wave reached forward as though in greeting, brushing against the land with a quiet sigh, then retreating again to gather itself. The rhythm soothed me, each sound blending into the next, steady as a heartbeat, its whispers moving through me like a lullaby. There was a silence, but not an empty one. It was a silence that breathed, that held me. The cry of seabirds had already softened. The wind's chatter had quieted into a murmur. In that silence, I heard other things, the faint hum of insects hidden in the grass beyond the dunes, the occasional rustle of a shell as the tide shifted it against another, the long, distant pull of the sea's body stretching and settling into its vastness. I breathed in, and the coolness seemed to open something wide inside me. I breathed out, and felt myself sink, as if each breath was an anchor lowering gently into calm waters. I felt no need to move, no need to speak, only to be there, to witness the slow deepening of night. The horizon softened until I could no longer tell where the sea ended and the sky began. Both wore the same silver sheen, both carried the same quiet promise. A kind of openness spread before me, infinite yet comforting, like the softest blanket unrolled across the world. My thoughts, usually restless, began to drift more slowly, loosening their grip, following the rhythm of the waves. As the light faded further, I began to notice how darkness did not come all at once, but in layers, gentle and overlapping. A shade deeper here, a shade dimmer there, each folding over the other, like the quiet movements of a hand smoothing a sheet. My eyes adjusted, my breath slowed, and I felt myself folding into that same rhythm. It was then that I first felt the presence of something larger, though not in the way one notices a sound or a sight. It was subtler, like a shift in the tide of thought, or the gentle awareness of being accompanied in solitude. The sea seemed to thrum beneath its surface, a quiet suggestion of vastness moving unseen. I didn't look for it directly, not yet. Instead, I allowed myself to rest in the feeling, to let the openness of the horizon hold me. Time stretched. Minutes or hours, I couldn't have said which. The coming of night, it belongs to breaths, to waves, to the steady dimming of light. I was no longer waiting for anything to happen, only allowing myself to be carried, moment by moment, by the unfolding stillness. I remember closing my eyes for a while, just long enough to feel the world more deeply through other senses. The cool, salt air touched my lips. The sand pressed gently against my feet. The hush of the water entered me as though it were my own breath. For those moments, I was not separate from the sea, not separate from the sky. I was simply part of the slow arrival of night, as natural and unhurried as the tide itself. When I opened my eyes again, twilight had deepened further. The first faint stars were beginning to reveal themselves, timid at first, like whispers in the high reaches of the sky. They shimmered delicately, as though uncertain of their place, and then, one by one, they grew bolder, weaving their way into the firmament, the day. And though I did not yet see the whale, though I did not yet know how the night would be carried across the sea, I felt the opening of something vast and gentle. It was a night that asked nothing of me. It was a night that simply invited me to rest within it, to be held by its stillness. And so I stayed there, breathing with the ocean, breathing with the sky. My heart softened by the first quiet breath of night. The twilight deepened in such a tender way that I could hardly tell where. One shade ended and the next began. The colors softened with every breath of the evening, melting into one another like ink spreading gently across water. The pale blush along the horizon gave way to muted lavender, then to indigo, and finally to the darker velvet of night that hovered just beyond sight. It was a slow unfurling, the kind of change you might miss if you looked too closely. But if you simply surrendered to the moment, you could feel it in the air. Like the deepening of a sigh, the sea mirrored this transformation. In silence, the water that had glimmered faintly silver now held a softer glow, as though it were collecting pieces of the sky and laying them carefully across its surface. Of liquid silk, between those glimmers stretched pools of shadow, darkening as the sky deepened, until the ocean became a vast fabric of silver and blue stitched together with moving seams. The air carried its own story. The salt drifted more strongly now that the heat of the day had eased, no longer masked by the warmth of sun or the bustling sounds of daylight. That every wave carried with it not just water, but the essence of a great and ancient being. Each inhalation brought that salt into me, cooling my chest, clearing the edges of my thoughts, as if I were being rinsed clean by the air itself. Insects stirred softly in the grasses behind me, their hum weaving a steady thread through the growing quiet. life continued its quiet songs. Farther away, seabirds called to one another, voices thinning with distance, fading as they returned to their roosts. Their cries were less sharp than during the day, softened now into something wistful, as if the birds themselves were weary, ready to fold themselves into the shelter of night. All around me, the world leaned gently into rest. There was no moment of decision, no signal or sudden change. It was as though everything, air, sea, earth, sky, had agreed long before that this would be the time for stillness. The day did not vanish, it bowed, offering itself gracefully to the night, and the night, patient and unhurried, accepted. I thought of how night always comes, this wane ever rushing, never startling, but simply arriving, like the steady tide, like breath itself. It did not need to announce its presence, it only needed to be allowed. The longer I stood there, the more I felt that stillness reaching into me. My body, which had carried the weight of movement and thought through the day, now seemed to loosen. My shoulders softened, my breath lengthened, and even my mind, so often restless, began to follow the slow rhythm of the sea. I felt the truth of it, that the arrival of night is not something that happens outside of us, but something we feel within. Just as the horizon darkens and the sky blossoms with stars, so too does the heart prepare itself for quiet, for rest. And yet, beneath all this serenity, there was another presence, something so subtle at first that I almost mistook it for imagination. It was not a sound I could name, not a sight I could clearly see, but rather a stirring, like the shift of a current deep below the surface. The horizon itself seemed to hum faintly, as if holding a secret. I sensed something vast moving beyond the reach of my islo, immense, ancient. The awareness was not startling. It did not disturb the quiet, but instead folded itself into it. It was as though the sea had been hiding this presence all along, waiting until I was still enough to notice. The water carried a deeper rhythm now, a pulse beneath the visible waves. My body seemed to respond instinctively, slowing further, as though aligning itself with that unseen cadence. I did not yet know what it was, this vastness beyond sight. It might have been no more than the suggestion of night itself, stretching its great body across the sea. Or perhaps it was the first quiet whisper of the whale, the one who carried night upon its back. Whatever it was, I felt it waiting, steady and patient, not pressing forward, but simply existing, immense and gentle. The twilight sank deeper, carrying me with it. The insects hummed, the seabirds grew silent, and the salt air cooled further. I stood at the edge of the ocean, cradled by the slow arrival of night. And though I did not yet see the shape of what moved beyond the horizon, I felt its nearness, a presence as vast as the sea, as timeless as the stars, already unfolding quietly around me, already carrying me into stillness. And so I remained there, breathing with the world, sensing the deepening of night, both within and beyond, as if the horizon itself had begun to open, to stretch wide, to prepare for the passage of something greater than I could yet imagine. Asterisk, out beyond the horizon, where the sea and sky had already blended into one seamless expanse of deepening indigo, I felt the stirring again. It moved like a breath beneath the water, so slow, so patient, that for a while I thought it might only be the imagination of twilight playing with my senses. The air was cool and steady, the the waves small and rhythmic. And yet there was something more, something vast, rising through the quiet. The first glimpse came not with suddenness, but with inevitability, as if the ocean itself had always intended to reveal what it held. The surface shifted, lifting as though it too were taking a long, slow breath. Then, emerging with a grace so immense it seemed to belong more to dream than to waking sight, a shape began to rise from the depths. It was a whale so great in size that the water slid down its back in silken streams, as though the sea had been keeping it hidden beneath layers of shadow until now. And yet, though its form was enormous, there was nothing frightening in its presence. It rose slowly, calmly, its every movement steeped in peace, as if it carried with it the very rhythm of night. For a long moment I only watched, unable to measure the scale of what I was seeing. It was not like witnessing something new, but like encountering something ancient, something already written into my being. It felt less like seeing and more like remembering, as though the whale had always been there, carrying the night upon its back, and I had only now opened my eyes to it. The surface of its body shimmered faintly, not with harsh brightness, but with a soft glow, as though the stars themselves had settled upon its skin. Tiny points of light glimmered across the curve of its back, not scattered at random, but arranged in constellations, quiet echoes of the heavens above. They shifted as the whale moved, reflecting across the rippling water until it seemed that the sea was holding two skies at once, one above in the vast dome of night, and one carried gently across the whale's immense form. The sight did not rouse excitement or any restless energy. Instead, it settled me more deeply into stillness, wrapping me in awe the way the evening wraps the earth in shadow. The whale did not rush, did not startle the water, or disturb the quiet. It only moved as though the sea itself had become part of its body, and the sky part of its breath. Each slow rise of its back above the water seemed to say, "There is no need for haste, no need for noise. All things will come in their time." The air felt different now, touched by something ancient and tender. The salt was softer, carrying with it the faintest scent of distance, as though the whale had brought with it the memory of oceans far beyond my sight. The breeze brushed across my face like a whisper of that memory, and I let it move through me. Loosening the last remnants of day, I noticed how the water changed around the whale, how the ripples widened outward in circles, each one gentler than the last, until they were no longer waves, but soft undulations, like breath spreading across the surface. The sea, once restless in its shifting, now seemed calmer in the whale's presence, as though even the tides wished to mirror its stillness. I found myself breathing with it long, slow, unhurried breaths that carried me deeper into quiet. The sound of the waves blended into the rhythm of my chest, and in that rhythm I felt held, as though the whale itself was teaching me how to rest. Its head remained just beneath the surface, unseen, but its back stretched long and wide, constellations shimmering across it like lanterns adrift in dark water. I thought of how stars are said to guide travelers, yet here they were not fixed in the heavens, but moving gently across the sea, carried with effortless grace by this ancient being. Perhaps, I thought, the night sky itself was too heavy for the heavens to hold alone, and so the whale carried part of it, ferrying the darkness gently across the world. There was no sound but the quiet hush of water falling from its back, no movement but the slow, deliberate rising and sinking of its body. And in that simplicity, I felt something sacred, the kind of sacredness not found in grandeur or ceremony, but in the quiet certainty of belonging, as though the world, in its vastness, still had room for gentleness, still had time for slowness, still had patience enough for awe. I stood with the sand cool beneath my feet, the tide lapping softly at my ankles, and let myself dissolve into that awe. Not the sharp kind that demands exclamations, but the deep, hushed awe that stills the mind and softens the heart. I thought of how rarely we allow ourselves to see with such openness, how often we hurry past the quiet miracles that surround us. Yet here, in the presence of the whale, there was no possibility of hurrying. There was only the invitation to be still, to notice, to remember. The twilight sky above me grew darker, stars multiplying in the deepening blue, and I saw how those same stars seemed to echo across the whale's back, as if the creature were a bridge between sea and sky. My eyes moved from above to below, from the heavens to the water, and I could not tell where one ended and the other began. It was all one expanse, all one slow breath, carried by this gentle giant of the sea. The world felt different now, quieter than before, yet fuller, as if the presence of the whale had not broken the silence, but enriched it, added depth to it, the way shadows add depth to light. The silence became a space in which I could rest completely, without need for thought or question, and so I stayed, there, breathing with the whale, wrapped in stillness, watching the shimmer of stars drift across its back. I felt no urge to move, no urge to speak, only to remain present, to let the majesty of this gentle being wash through me like a tide in that moment. Standing on the edge of the sea, I knew that night was not simply arriving. It was being carried tenderly, deliberately, by the whale, who moved so slowly and so surely across the waters, and I, standing in the hush of the shore, was being carried with it. The whale lingered there at the surface, half sea and half sky, its great back glimmering with constellations that seemed too perfect, too delicate to belong only to the ocean. The air grew stiller around me, as if even the wind wished to pause, to wait for what might come next. I watched the slow arch of its form, the gentle rise and fall of water against its sides, and then so quietly I almost missed it, the whale exhaled. The breath rose into the night as a plume of mist, not forceful, not loud, but soft as a sigh, released into the cool air. At first it appeared as a faint vapor, a pale cloud drifting upward, but as it spread, I saw light woven through it, tiny sparks glimmering within the silver haze. One by one, those sparks began to drift apart, glowing with their own delicate brightness, until I realized what I was seeing. The whale was breathing stars into the night. They rose like lanterns released from an unseen hand, weightless and slow, drifting upward on invisible currents. Each spark of light shimmered in the air before settling into the vastness above, finding its place among the waiting constellations. The sky, which moments before had been sparse with only a scattering of early stars, now blossomed with new light, each one a gift carried on the whale's breath. I watched in stillness, my own breath suspended as though I might disturb the gentle work of the night if I exhaled too loudly. The stars continued to rise, not in haste, not in a rush, but in their own time, as though even they understood the sacredness of their journey. Slowly they ascended, drifting higher and higher, until they dissolved seamlessly into the dome of the heavens. The water below mirrored every spark. Each new star found its twin upon the sea, where ripples turned points of light into trembling jewels. I looked down and saw a second sky trembling beneath me, as if the ocean had decided to keep a reflection of the gift for itself. My eyes moved from above to below, from the wide open sky to the liquid mirror, and for a while I could not tell which was the truer night. I felt those stars reflected within me as well. They seemed to settle into my own gaze, filling me with a shimmer of light that reached beyond sight. It was as if the whale's breath had carried not only stars for the heavens, but also small seeds of illumination for the heart, quiet reminders that I, too, belonged to this unfolding night. The whale drew another long breath, the sound so deep and low it seemed to rise from the ocean's floor. Then, once again, it released that breath into the air. Another mist, another bloom of light. More stars drifted upward, glowing softly as they took their places among the constellations. The night sky thickened, richer and more radiant with each exhale, until it no longer seemed like emptiness above me, but a living tapestry, woven moment by moment. I thought of how interconnected everything was, how the whale's breath became the sky's brilliance, how the sea carried the reflection, how my own body echoed that rhythm in my slowing breath. Nothing was separate. The whale was not only of the sea, but of the sky, and I was not only a witness, but a participant, breathing with it, held within the same vast quiet. There was no boundary here, no line between creature and ocean, between sky and self. Only the flowing exchange of breath and light, water and reflection. I felt that even the smallest insect humming in the grasses, even the birds tucked away in their nests, even the shifting sand beneath my feet, all of it was part of this same unfolding, all of it belonging. The whale exhaled again, and another scatter of stars drifted upward, slower this time, as if the night itself was growing fuller, heavier with light. They rose like fragile embers, and as they settled into their places, I thought of how every star is both near and far, how each one touches us, even from a distance we cannot measure. Perhaps, I wondered, it is not the vastness of space that separates us, but the intimacy of light that binds us together. I stood with my arms loosely at my sides, palms open to the air, as if I might catch one of those drifting sparks. None fell to me, and yet I felt as though I had received them all, each one entering me in silence. My body felt porous, my heart wider, as though the stars had slipped inside simply by being seen. The whale continued its slow breathing, each exhale a gift of new stars, each inhale a gathering of the sea's endless depth. I lost track of time watching this rhythm, the rise of mist, the shimmer of sparks, the slow ascent into night. The process was so steady, so natural, that it seemed less a miracle than a reminder of something ancient, something always happening, just beyond the edge of ordinary sight. And as I stood there, I realized that wonder does not need to shout. It does not need to dazzle or overwhelm. Sometimes wonder is as gentle as a breath, as unassuming as a star appearing quietly where none had been before. Sometimes wonder is simply noticing that we are part of something vast and tender, something that holds us without condition. The whale exhaled once more, and this time I closed my eyes, letting the mist of imagined starlight drift through me. I felt the hush of the world deepen, felt myself dissolve further into the rhythm of sea and sky. I breathed in, carrying salt and coolness into my chest. I breathed out, releasing myself into the same silence that held the whale, the stars, the endless night. And in that simple exchange, I belonged fully, not apart from the world, but within it, inseparable from the breath of the whale, the shimmer of the stars, the quiet unfolding of the sea. Asterisk, the whale lingered a while longer at the surface, breathing stars into the sky until the heavens were scattered with countless points of light. I stood at the edge of the shore, the hush of the world around me, and felt a quiet invitation drawing me forward, not in haste, not in longing, but in a gentle pull, as though the sea itself wished me to follow. A small boat rested nearby, pulled just far enough onto the sand that the tide brushed at its sides. It seemed to wait there with the same still patience as the whale, offering itself without urgency. I placed my hand on its worn wooden edge, the surface cool and smooth beneath my palm, and let my fingers trace the lines that time and salt had carved into it. Then, without thought of where it might take me, I stepped inside. The boat rocked softly, adjusting to my presence, and then surrendered itself back to the rhythm of the tide. I did nothing to steer. The oars lay quietly across the benches, and I had no desire to lift them. Instead, I let the water decide, let the waves guide me. The tide carried me outward, away from the shore, and into the wide openness of the sea, where the whale drifted like a constellation made flesh. The boat moved with such ease it felt, less like traveling and more like floating within a dream. The sound of water lapping against its sides mingled with the slow sigh of the sea, a rhythm so steady it seemed to replace the beating of my own heart. I felt no need to control, no need to measure distance or direction. I trusted the tide, trusted the path shaped by the whale's immense presence ahead of me. The whale moved slowly, carrying the weight of night upon its back, as if it were no burden at all. Its pace was deliberate, unhurried, as though it knew that the sea had all the time in the world. The stars shimmered faintly across its surface, their reflections trembling across the water between us, creating a bridge of light that seemed to connect my small drifting boat to the vastness of its body. I felt myself surrendering further with each passing moment. There was nothing to grasp, nothing to chase, only the soft unfolding of one breath after another, one ripple after the next. To follow the whale was not to pursue, but to yield, to let myself be carried along the path it shaped in its presence. Trust came easily, as natural as the moon's reflection on the water. The waves rocked me gently, and I leaned back against the boat's edge, allowing my body to be cradled by its wooden frame. My thoughts, so often tangled and restless, now seemed to drift as loosely as the water itself. I thought of how rarely we allow ourselves to be carried, how often we fight the currents, striving to push forward on our own strength. But here, in this vast quiet, I felt the relief of surrender, the deep peace of being held by forces greater than myself. The stars above mirrored the stars below, and the whale was the seam between them, carrying the night from one realm to the other. I watched the slow arc of its back rise and fall, listened to the distant hush of water sliding from its sides, and let those sounds fold into me. Each motion of the whale was measured, spacious, free of urgency. It seemed to teach by example, showing me how to move through the world with ease, how to breathe without hurry, how to carry the weight of the sky without strain. The boat drifted steadily, and I gave myself fully to its rhythm. I felt the rocking beneath me, not as movement, but as embraceage, tilt, a reminder that I was held, each sway a gentle reassurance. My body loosened further, my breath lengthened, and a softness spread through me, as though I too were being carried across the sea. The air was cooler here, farther from the warmth of land. It brushed across my skin like silk, carrying with it the endless salt of the ocean, the faintest trace of seaweed and stone. Each inhalation felt like a gift, something drawn from the depths and offered freely. Each exhalation felt like release, a letting go into the quiet around me. I was no longer a traveler moving through the night. I was part of the night itself, moving because it moved, resting because it rested. The whale remained always ahead, never too far, its vast shadow glimmering. With starlight, I did not seek to draw nearer, nor did I worry about falling behind. There was no destination, no measure of progress. There was only this drifting, this quiet following, this surrender to the rhythm of sea and sky. I thought of trust, not the trust we place in things uncertain, but the deeper trust of belonging. Trust that the tide would carry me, that the night would hold me, that the whale would continue its steady path. Trust not as a choice, but as the natural state of things, as effortless as floating on water. And in that trust, I discovered a kind of freedom I had not known before. Freedom from the need to decide, to grasp, to strive. Freedom in letting myself be small within something immeasurable, and safe within its immensity. The whale exhaled again, mist rising into the night, another scattering of stars joining the sky. I watched them ascend and settle into place, watched their reflections shimmer around my boat, and felt myself shimmering with them. It was as though I, too, was part of that exhalation, as though each breath of the whale carried me farther into stillness. The sea stretched endlessly, but I felt no fear of its vastness. The boat, though small, felt secure, held in the rhythm of waves that knew me as well as they knew the shore. The whale, immense and serene, moved ahead with patience enough for us both, and I, drifting quietly in its path, felt only the deep relief of surrender, the peace of being carried through the night by something greater than myself. The moon rose slowly, as if it too wished not to disturb the calm that had settled over the sea. At first, its glow was faint, only a pale shimmer pressed against the horizon. But with each moment it grew, climbing into the night until it rested fully above the water. Its light spread in a wide path across the waves, turning their dark rolling into liquid silver. The whale glided steadily ahead, and under this new illumination, its back gleamed like polished obsidian. The stars scattered across its vast surface seemed to burn more brightly now, as though the moon had chosen to draw them out to highlight every shimmer that had been hidden in shadow. The creature was both dark and luminous, both shadow and starlight, as if it carried within it the paradox of night itself. I watched the light fold itself over the sea, softening everything it touched. The jagged edges of waves became gentle arcs, their movements fluid and serene. The world lost its sharpness, surrendering instead to a glow that blurred boundaries, blending sky and water, reflection and reality. The moonlight did not demand attention. It simply existed, tender and vast, a presence that eased everything it met. I thought about how light can be loud during the day, commanding, insistent, but here in the quiet of night, the moon's light was the opposite, hushed, patient, endlessly forgiving. It revealed without overwhelming, illuminated without piercing. It was a kind of light that invited the world to rest, to breathe, to become softer than it had been. The boat rocked gently beneath me, carried on silver swells. I reached for the oars, not out of necessity, but out of rhythm, feeling the need to move with the water, to match its pace. When I dipped the wooden blades into the sea, they slid through without resistance, parting the shining surface with a whisper. Each pull was unhurried, each stroke no more than an extension of breath. The sound of water dripping from the oars was as steady as a heartbeat, echoing softly in the stillness. I found myself breathing in time with the motion. Inhale as the oars lifted, exhale as they pressed back into the sea. The rhythm was not meant to carry me forward quickly, but to join me more deeply to the sea's own cadence. The whale's presence never faltered. It moved with the same serene pace, its immense back glistening each time it rose higher above the waves. From time to time, the moonlight would strike a curve of its body in just such a way that it seemed to glow from within, as though it contained its own secret tide of radiance. And I felt as though I too was being illuminated, not by the brightness of day, but by the gentleness of night, which revealed not surfaces, but depths. The sea became a mirror, reflecting both the whale and the sky, so that I no longer knew where the water ended and the heavens began. The boat seemed to float, not only on water, but on light itself, resting within a corridor of silver that stretched endlessly in every direction. I let myself sink into that thought, letting it dissolve the edges of who I was, so that I became as much reflection as reality, as much water as air. Moonlight has a way of softening the world, but it also has a way of softening the heart. I felt my thoughts grow gentler, less insistent, as though they too were bathed in silver. Old worries seemed to lose their sharpness here, becoming rounded and quiet, carried off like small ripples, fading into the larger rhythm of the sea. The oars moved slowly, almost lazily, yet each motion seemed perfectly timed with the rise and fall of the waves. I did not row to travel, I rowed to breathe. Each stroke was a meditation, a way of placing myself within the flow of water and light, of joining body and breath to the quiet vastness surrounding me. The wooden creak of the boat, the sigh of water parting, the whisper of dripping of it wove together into a lullaby that eased me further inward. Ahead, the whale exhaled once more, and for an instant, the rising mist caught the moonlight. It glittered as though made of powdered glass, a shimmering veil suspended in the night. Ere before dissolving slowly into stars, they drifted upward, gentle as falling snow in reverse, before settling among the constellations already spread across the sky. The sight brought with it a feeling of profound belonging, as though everything, whale, sea, moon, stars, and myself, were bound by the same luminous thread. We were not separate, but woven into one great fabric of night, each of us carrying light in some form, each of us softened by the presence of the moon. The path of silver stretched on and on, widening the farther. The moon climbed. I felt no need to know where it ended, no urgency to discover what lay ahead. The journey itself was complete, each moment a destination of its own. The act of drifting, breathing, rowing in slow rhythm, this was enough, more than enough. The air was cool on my face, the kind of coolness that carries freshness rather than chill. It felt like a blessing, like the sea itself exhaling across my skin. I leaned back slightly, letting my gaze lift upward, and watched the moon sitting high in the dark velvet of the sky. It seemed impossibly far and yet impossibly near, as though it hovered both above and within me. The whale moved with calm certainty, and I followed in its shimmering wake. My oars dipped and rose, my breath deepened, and the silver light wrapped itself around me until I could not tell where it ended and I began. Everything was hushed, softened, opened, and within that endless quiet, I felt myself carried not only across the sea, but deeper into stillness itself. The whale glided on, and with each steady motion of its vast body, the water around me became more luminous. The sea no longer seemed only a surface of waves, but something deeper, something that shimmered as though it held entire skies within itself. The constellations above were mirrored below, until I felt suspended between two heavens, one arched high above, the other drifting in slow ripples beneath my boat. The reflections did not stay still. They trembled with the breathing of the water, breaking apart into fragments and then joining again, like petals rearranging themselves in a hidden current. I gazed into them, and it was as though I were drifting over a floating garden, each star a delicate bloom resting on black soil made of night. The sea was no longer only water, it was a vast, breathing garden of light, tended by silence, fed by moonlight. As I drifted, I thought of the gardens I had known on land, the gentle rows of flowers that opened each morning to the sun, the way their fragrance rose in the warmth of early summer air. I remembered the slow act of kneeling in soil, pressing seeds into the earth with quiet hands, and waiting for days and weeks until something green would rise. A garden always required patience, a stillness of spirit that matched the pace of the unseen. You could not rush a seed, just as you could not rush the coming of night. The stars mirrored on the water stirred that same sense within me. They were like seeds scattered across a dark field, blooming into light one by one as the whale breathed them into being. And just as in any garden, there was no urgency here. The stars did not force their glow. They unfolded with the gentleness of something entirely at peace with its own time. The air around me carried the faint scent of salt, cool and open. I closed my eyes for a moment and imagined I was in a garden, again not of earth and leaves, but of water and sky. The hush of waves was like the rustle of branches. The slow breathing of the whale was like wind through tall grass, and the stars themselves seemed like blossoms that never withered, petals of light unfurling forever in the great stillness. I let my thoughts settle into that rhythm, into the patience of growth. The sea rocked me gently, the boat a cradle on its quiet tide, and I found myself thinking of how a garden does not demand it, simply waits, allowing what will be to come in its time. Night felt the same. It did not arrive all at once, but slowly, softening the world until everything was ready to rest. The longer I watched the mirrored constellations, the more they began to feel like memories, fragments of all the nights I had ever known, reflected back to me through the water. Some stars shimmered as though touched by laughter once heard. Others quivered like the edges of forgotten dreams. It was not a garden only of light, but of memory too. Each reflection carrying the quiet weight of something once lived, something gently returned. In that garden of reflections, I felt myself growing softer inside, as though some part of me was also unfolding, opening like a flower in moonlight. The boundaries between outer and inner landscapes blurred. The sea, the stars, the quiet garden I carried in my memory, all of them seemed to breathe together, patient and unhurried. The whale's path guided me deeper into this dreamlike orchard of light. Each rise of its back sent a ripple across the mirrored constellations, scattering the stars like petals carried on water, only for them to gather again, reforming their shapes with endless calm. The constellations above and below answered one another, and I, drifting between them, felt as though I too had become part of their silent conversation. I thought of how tending a garden often meant simply being present, watering, listening, watching for signs of growth. There was something tender in that practice, something that asked for stillness more than action. And here, on the open sea, the same truth lingered. I was not moving toward anything. I was simply present, tending to the moment as it bloomed, allowing the reflections to shift and shimmer without needing to change them. The oars rested beside me, their wooden handles cool beneath my fingers. I had no need to move them now, no reason to steer. The sea carried me as a garden carries the fragrance of its blossoms, gently, without effort. I breathed deeply, letting the cool air fill me, and exhaled slowly, as though my breath, too, might become part of the night's unfolding. Time itself seemed to dissolve in that space. The stars, the whale, the silver light, the memory of gardens, they all existed together, without boundary, without beginning or end. It was a landscape, both vast and intimate, a reflection not only of the sky, but of the quietest parts of myself. I lowered my hand to the water, letting my fingers brush its surface. Ripples spread outward, bending the reflections into new shapes. For a moment, the constellations seemed to dance, shifting like flowers stirred by a passing wind. And then they stilled again, falling back into place with patient ease. Even when disturbed, the garden of stars knew how to return to itself. I leaned back and let my body rest fully into the wooden curve of the boat. Above me, the stars glowed in endless patterns. Below me, their reflections wove another sky. Around me, the sea was steady, alive with its quiet breathing. It was as though the whole world had become a garden of patience and light, inviting me to surrender to its stillness. And so I did. I let my thoughts grow lighter, softer, like petals drifting free of their stems. I let myself belong to that floating garden, not as a gardener now, but as something grown within it, nourished by silence, tended by night. The whale moved ahead with unbroken calm, and I drifted in its wake. Surrounded by constellations blooming on the sea, the garden expanded endlessly, yet it also gathered me inward, into a place where nothing hurried, nothing pressed, only breath. only water, only stars unfolding. And in that slow and endless unfolding, I felt myself rest. Asterisk, the whale moved ahead, slow and steady, carrying the night upon its great back. The sea was hushed, the air cool and silver, when a sound began to rise from the deep. It came so gently at first, I thought it might be only the hum of the tide or the faint sigh of wind across the open water. But then it gathered, low and resonant, until I felt it not only in my ears, but deep within my chest. The whale had begun to sing. The sound stretched out in long, unhurried waves, each note like a breath drawn from the heart of the sea. It was not a song made of words, but of tones that seemed to carry meaning far beyond speech. The first note lingered, rich and soft, vibrating through water, through air, through the hollow wood of my little boat, and then through me. It settled into my bones, into the rhythm of my breath, until I could not tell where the whale's song ended and where I began. It felt like a lullaby for the entire ocean, a voice older than time, deep and endless, soothing not only the creatures hidden beneath the waves, but the sky above, the stars drifting quietly in their places. Each note seemed to reach outward in circles, touching everything at once, leaving behind a calm so wide and gentle that even the night itself leaned closer to listen. The song slowed my heartbeat. I could feel it easing the restless edges of thought, coaxing them into stillness, the way waves coax foam into calm water. My breath lengthened, falling into the same rhythm, as if the whale's music had become the tide that carried me, in and out, in and out. The song was the sea itself, breathing through me. Another note rose, lower still, deeper than I thought sound could reach. It seemed to tremble through the surface of the water, pressing into the air like a vast hand, smoothing everything into quietness. The boat rocked with it, each vibration carrying me into a softer place, as though the sea had become a cradle, rocked by song. The whale continued, one note, then a pause, another, then another, each held for a long moment, released like a sigh, two vast forelungs, yet tender as the hush one gives to a child. I listened as though I had always known the melody, as though it was not being sung for the first time, but remembered, reawakened, echoing from the deep places of memory, where the sea and I were the same. It felt less like listening and more like drifting, less like sound and more like being held. The whale's song wrapped around me, folded me into the stillness it carried, each tone repeated, not hurried, not demanding, only steady, only sure, only patient. The repetition became its own rhythm, long note, silence, long note, silence, as steady as a heartbeat, as constant as breath, over and over, until I too was part of that endless pattern. Long note, silence, long note, silence, the sea breathing, the whale breathing, I breathing. I thought of how every lullaby I had ever heard carried the same secret, the truth that repetition itself is comfort, that rhythm is a kind of love. And here, the ocean itself was being sung to sleep, its vast body rocked by a melody only it could hold. The notes changed subtly, rising and falling in wide arcs, like tides shifting under the pull of moonlight. Some carried a low hum that trembled in the belly of the sea. Others lifted higher, ringing faintly in the cool air, like echoes of starlight woven into sound. But none of them rushed. Each one unfurled at its own pace, taking all the time it needed, asking nothing but listening. I leaned back in the boat, eyes half closed, and let the song move through me. The whale's voice was not outside of me, now it had become my own inner tide. My body rose with it, fell with it, my thoughts dissolving into its slow repetition. I no longer carried my breath alone. The sea was breathing me, the whale was breathing me, the night was breathing me. Long note, silence, long note, silence, over and over, like the rocking of waves, like the drift of stars, like the rhythm of sleep itself. The water shivered with each sound, and in those ripples, the constellations trembled too, stars bending and swaying as if they too had surrendered to the song. I watched them quiver and settle, their reflections soft as petals. Even the moon seemed gentler, its light falling more quietly, as though it too was soothed by the whale's voice. I felt smaller and yet more connected, as though I were one thread in a vast fabric woven from sound and silence. The whale sang, the sea held me, the stars listened, the night gathered around us. Nothing was separate. Everything belonged. I let the repetition carry me further inward. Each note was a reminder. You are safe. You are here. You are held. The silence between was just as tender, a pause where the heart could rest. Together, they made a pattern of comfort, a weaving of sound and quietness that lulled every part of me. Long note, silence, long note, silence. I listened until the listening became sleep itself. The whale's song continued, vast and unending, a lullaby for everything that floated in the arms of the night. Asterisk, the whale's song lingered in the air, stretching into silence so vast, it seemed the night itself leaned against it. I sat very still, my breath soft, my body cradled by the slow rocking of the boat. Then, from the dark water, a faint shimmer began to stir. At first, it was only a suggestion, a pale glow beneath the surface, as though the sea itself were remembering the starlight. But slowly, gently, the shimmer grew, spreading outward, until I could see tiny points of light rising from the deep. One by one, they drifted upward, slow as breath, slow as thought. Each glow carried the soft steadiness of a lantern, no flame, no smoke, only light suspended in the water, lifting itself toward the surface. They gathered in clusters, drifting, swaying, rising like blossoms of brightness, unfolding in the darkness of the sea. It was as if the whale's song had awakened them, called them forth from secret places where night and water met. The boat glided into their midst without sound. Around me, the sea began to shine, the lanterns gathering so many that the water no longer looked dark but luminous, as though it were threaded through with 1,000 small constellations. Each time the whale released another long note, more lights answered, rising in slow spirals, glowing with quiet devotion. I leaned forward, watching them drift. Their glow was gentle, never harsh, the kind of light that asks for nothing, that only offers itself without urgency. Some were close enough that I could see their edges blur in the water, trembling with the rhythm of the current. Others remained far below, faint glimmers, hinting at depths too endless to imagine. It felt as though the sea held an entire sky of its own, hidden until this moment, a reflection not of the stars above, but of the stars within. The boat passed through, carried by the tide, as though it had always belonged to this lantern-lit path. I trailed my fingers through the water and felt the coolness stir, the glowing points scattering like soft embers, then gathering again just as calmly. Every motion was answered by the light, but never in haste. Even in movement, they knew how. To remain still, I thought of how light always finds its way into darkness, how even the deepest sea carries its own hidden stars. The lanterns reminded me that darkness is never emptied and unhurried, and here, surrounded by the glow, I felt that same blooming within myself, a quiet brightness rising from the depths of my being, steady and unforced. The whale's song continued, each note long and low, as though it were guiding the lanterns upward, weaving sound with light. When the notes rolled through the sea, the glowing forms seemed to sway in answer, as though dancing to the music. I felt as if I were drifting not only through water, but through a hymn made visible, each lantern a syllable, each glow a word of comfort. The further we drifted, the more the lanterns gathered, until the sea appeared like a great mirrored sky. Above me, stars glittered in the heavens, and below me, their reflections brighter, nearer, alive burned softly in the water. For a moment, I could not tell which direction was truly above, which below. It was as though I were drifting between two skies, carried through a passageway of light that had no end. The stillness deepened. My thoughts slowed, softened, folding into the hush that surrounded me. There was no need to name what I saw, no need to reach for explanation, only to drift, to breathe, to belong. The glow wrapped around me like a blanket woven from starlight, and I felt myself becoming lighter, quieter, as though the sea were teaching me how to shine without effort. The lanterns floated higher, some breaking the surface, where their glow spread outward in small ripples that shimmered before fading. Others remained beneath, forming rivers of light that curved and bent with the current. They created a map across the water, not of places, but of calm itself. A map one could follow only by surrendering to drift, by trusting the sea to carry. The way I closed my eyes for a time, yet even then I could feel their presence. The glow seemed to press gently against my eyelids, soft and steady, until it felt as though I carried the lanterns inside me. It was a reminder that every quiet spark, no matter how small, finds its place in the vastness of night. The whale sang again, and the sound deepened everything, the water, the light, the air around me. The lanterns seemed to breathe in time, pulsing faintly, as though each one carried its own heart. Their rhythm matched my own, and for a while it was impossible to tell if I was watching them or if they were watching me, holding me in their patient, glowing gaze. The boat drifted on, carried without effort, and I surrendered to the current completely. Around me, the sea was alive with light, and within me, a quiet acceptance grew. There was no need to ask where the whale was leading, no need to wonder how far the journey would go. In the sea of lanterns, everything was already enough. Every flicker of glow, every pause between notes, every soft breath of night. I let the stillness settle deeper, let it fold itself over my thoughts. The lanterns rose and fell, stars above and stars below, and I was only a small vessel drifting between them, breathing in their light, breathing out their calm. It felt like being carried by a dream that had no need for waking, a dream where darkness itself was luminous, where every shadow carried its own glow. The whale's voice hummed low and endless, and the lanterns listened, shining gently in reply. and I drifted on through a sea of stars that belonged not to the sky, but to the quiet heart of the ocean itself. Asterisk, the whale moved steadily onward, its vast back glimmering faintly, a dark mountain edged with starlight, and I followed without effort, letting the tide carry my small boat further into the unending sea. Around me, the night seemed to deepen, yet also soften, as though the more it stretched outward, the more it became a cradle. The whale did not hurry, and so neither did I. Each movement was measured in silence, each moment drawn out like a breath. That did not need to end. Above me, the sky lay scattered with countless stars, their light ancient and unwavering, while below, the sea still shimmered with lanterns, their glow rising gently from the depths. I floated between them, suspended in a corridor of light, and it felt as though I had slipped into a place where time itself no longer moved forward, but spread outward, vast and endless, the way the ocean itself spreads. Every direction was filled with stars, each reflection blurring into the next, until up and down no longer seemed separate, until I was only drifting between two skies. The further we went, the quieter my thoughts became. They stretched like thin threads, unraveling into the water, dissolving into the calm. There was no need for remembering or reaching ahead. The present moment was endless, wide enough to hold all that I was and all that I was becoming in this stillness. The boat rocked gently, its rhythm joining the slow heartbeat of the sea, and I felt myself being carried, not just across the surface of water, but through something deeper, through a space made of patience, of breath, of infinite waiting. I watched the whale as it swam, its body moving with such ease that it seemed less like an animal and more like a part of the sea itself, a living piece of the night unfolding. Each slow rise of its back, each long descent into the water was a reminder that nothing needed to rush, that the act of being carried was already enough. I let my breath follow its rhythm, long and low, until the spaces between inhales grew. As vast as the horizon itself, the lanterns beneath the surface continued their gentle glow. But farther from the shore, they seemed softer, less clustered, more like faint embers drifting through a dark field. They moved with such patience, such quiet determination, that it felt as though they had been rising for ages, as though their journey upward was not a task but simply their way of being. And perhaps my drifting was the same, not an effort, but a surrender to the tide that knew where to carry me. There was no sense of distance anymore. I could not measure how far we had traveled, nor did I wish to. The sea stretched without edges, the sky above deepened without end, and my small place between them was enough. I was only a speck within the vastness, but never lost. The stars above, the lanterns below, the whale ahead, all of them held me, each in their own quiet way. The thought of time dissolved further still. There was no before, no after, only this drifting, this gentle carrying forward into the endless night. Have passed, or only a moment, and I would not know the difference. In this sea, the measure of life was not by hours or days, but by breaths, by the slow unfolding of light across water, by the weightless act of floating further. The boat creaked softly now and then, a tender reminder of wood and rope, of hands that once shaped it, but even those sounds seemed part of the stillness, part of the lullaby of night. My hands rested on my lap, my body yielding to the gentle rocking, and the world outside myself became the world within. Above and below, stars spread endlessly, and within me, a quiet mirrored their glow. The whale swam on, never hurried, never weary, as if it too were carried by something greater. Its slow progress was not toward a destination, but into an ever-widening stillness. I felt that same stillness gathering in me, layer upon layer, soft as folds of night air, until I too was less a person in a boat and more a drifting thought, a breath, a small light carried along with all the others. The sky tilted as the boat rocked, and for a moment the stars above and their reflections below aligned so perfectly that I felt suspended in a sphere of light, as though I were floating through the center of a globe made entirely of stars. In that moment, I thought, this is timelessness. Not the absence of time, but its gentlest unfolding, stretched so wide and so thin that it no longer presses upon me, but carries me instead. The sea breathed around me. The air flowed cool and steady. The lanterns rose without urgency, and I floated further, further still, my body weightless, my mind loosened, my heart beating as though in slow harmony with the stars themselves. I let my eyes rest half-closed, let the shimmer blur into a silver haze, and I felt the quiet seep deeper. Each moment unspooled into the next, seamless, formless, endless, until the act of floating was all that remained. The whale swam on, steady as breath. The sea cradled me, and the night stretched into forever. The whale rose again from the depths, its great back breaking the surface, with the quiet certainty of a mountain lifting itself into view. The sea spilled away from its body in sheets of silver, and for a long while I simply watched, as though watching the night itself being born anew. The whale lingered at the surface, and in the hush that followed, a thought drifted through me soft and unhurried, that perhaps within this vast creature there was another sky, hidden deep inside, waiting like a secret garden of stars. I let the thought unfold, as though unspooling a thread in stillness. If the whale carried the night upon its back, then perhaps within its boundless body lay constellations of its own stars, swimming slowly through its vastness, like fish gliding through a silent sea. I could almost see them, tiny lights moving, with patience, tracing gentle arcs and circles, arranging themselves into shapes that only the whale itself would ever truly know. As I drifted closer, it became easier to believe. The whale's skin, black as obsidian, polished by the tide, shimmered faintly, and in its depths I thought I glimpsed not merely reflections of the sky above, but a sky that belonged solely to the whale. Its back gleamed with hidden galaxies, faint spirals of light as delicate as the sweep of a brush across paper. And in that glimmering shimmer, I felt that I, too, carried a night within me. A secret space, just as wide, just as quiet, just as infinite. The thought calmed me further. How many skies live quietly inside us, I wondered. We do not always notice them, those constellations formed of memory and dream, of moments too small for words. Yet when we grow still enough, when we let the tide carry us without resistance, the stars within begin to glow, faint and patient, like lanterns rising from a hidden deep. I breathed slowly, and the night breathed with me. The whale lingered, half submerged, as though to remind me of this truth, that inner worlds are no less real than the ones spread endlessly overhead. I imagined myself drifting inside that hidden sky, floating weightless in the whale's vastness, surrounded by constellations I could not name but somehow remembered. Each star seemed to hold a piece of stillness, each cluster a story without words. The sea itself seemed to echo that vision. The stars above, the lanterns below, and the imagined constellations within the whale, all layered together until I could no longer separate them. I felt suspended in a tapestry of skysator, inner, endless. To carry a sky within while floating beneath another, a low and steady exhalation, and with it a mist of silver drifted upward, settling into the air like a veil. The stars seemed to thicken in its presence, gleaming more brightly, as though drawn to the rhythm of the whale's being. I watched, not with awe that startled, but with awe that quieted, that softened the edges of thought, until only silence remained. I let myself imagine, then, that I too was exhaling a sky, that each breath I released carried with it a faint glimmer of stars, drifting upward to join the infinite above. My body, my mind, my heart, each part of me could be its own vessel for light, its own quiet lantern. And I wondered if perhaps we all release stars in our own way, each time we pause long enough to be still, each time we choose to carry gentleness instead of haste. The whale shifted slightly, and the moonlight gathered along its back, revealing entire galaxies painted across the curve of its body. Some were faint, like whispers of light dissolving into darkness, while others shimmered boldly, bright as lantern flames. No need to hold on to the moment. It was enough to let it pass through me, as stars pass through a night sky, leaving trails too delicate to keep. The boat rocked gently, a rhythm steady as a lullaby, and I leaned back, eyes half closed, letting the vision of inner skies seep into me in the quiet. I thought of the listener, of you drifting here with me, and I wished only that you might feel your own inner sky begin to glow. Perhaps, if you are still enough, you might sense constellations hidden within yourself, patterns of memory and dream that shine softly in the quiet. They are not hurried, not demanding, but patient, like the stars above, waiting for you to notice their glow. If you close your eyes now, you might see them. You might find yourself floating through the gentle expanse of your own night, carried by stars you have always known, though you may not have named them. Quiet are all within you, all carried in your breath. The whale lingered a moment longer, back shimmering like galaxies set upon water, before slipping slowly forward, deeper into the night. I followed, drifting without effort, my boat part of the tide, my body part of the quiet. Inside me, I felt my own constellations glowing softly, carrying me further into rest. And so the sea became both mirror and vessel, the whale both guide and reflection, and I only a traveler between skies, outer and inner, endless and safe. The whale swam ahead, unhurried, its vast body moving with the patience of tides themselves. I let my boat drift in its wake, but after a while, my attention shifted, not only to the whale, not only to the stars above, but to the sea itself, the endless water that held me. It had its own rhythm, its own quiet lull, as though the ocean was breathing, and I was resting within its chest. The boat rose with each swell, then fell again, a motion so steady it began to dissolve thought, up, then down, a lift, then a settling. The rhythm asked for nothing from MIT, carried me without effort, without need for control. Each rise was like a gentle inhalation, each fall like a long, unhurried breath. I let myself move with it, letting the sea cradle me as though I were no heavier than a leaf. Waves whispered against the hull in hushed patterns, their voices softer than words, softer than memory. Sometimes the water pressed close, as though tucking me in. Sometimes it drew back, as though giving me space to drift. The motion was never sudden, never sharp. It was the rhythm of years, of centuries, of tides that had rocked against shorelines, long before I was born and would continue long after. The whale moved forward, yet never seemed far. Its presence was steady, as though it too was part of this lull, as though its path was drawn not in haste but in harmony with the water. And I realized that the whale did not merely move across the ocean. The whale was part of its rhythm, part of its pulse. Its vast body and the endless water were one, and in following it, I too was folded into that endlessness. I leaned back against the curve of the boat, and my body began to sway in time. The rocking was not just outside MIT, was inside as well. My breath followed it, rising with the swell, falling with the retreat. The rhythm entered my chest, softened my thoughts, slowed the beat of my heart. Soon, it seemed there was nothing left of me that was not rocking. Rocked as a child might be rocked, in arms that did not tire. Rocked as seeds are rocked in the soil by roots that shift gently around them. Rocked as the moon itself must be rocked in its orbit, slow and steady, circling without end. Every layer of the world seemed to move in this rhythm, this quiet back and forth, this tender balance between lifting and letting go. I repeated the feeling to myself as though it were a mantra, rocking, rocking, rocking. Each time I said it inwardly, my breath deepened, my body loosened. The boat swayed, the waves sighed, and all of it folded into the same unbroken motion, rocking, rocking, rocking. The stars above seemed to move with me. When the boat rose, they felt closer, like lanterns descending. When the boat dipped, they seemed to drift farther, like lights carried upward on a slow wind. Their shimmer blended with the sea's reflection, until I could not tell whether I was floating between them or within them. Each rise and fall carried me deeper into their quiet glow. Even the silence had a rhythm. Between the sound of each wave, there was a pause, a stillness that cradled me as much as the rocking itself. That pause was not empty, it was full of rest, as though the sea itself exhaled just long enough for me to breathe in, then drew me gently forward again. The whale's spout broke the quiet once, a soft exhalation, and it seemed to echo the rhythm perfectly. It was all one motion, all one lullaby, the sea, the whale, the boat, and my body swaying together. Time began to lose its edges. I could not tell how long I had been drifting. A minute could have been an hour could have been a single breath. It did not matter, for the sea's rhythm was older than time, and it needed no measure. It felt safe, infinite, as though the water would cradle me without end, never tiring, never letting me slip. The whale's presence reassured me, further steady, patient, unhurried. I followed its path not with my boat alone, but with my breath, my body, my heart, all moving to the same lull, rocking, rocking, rocking. The words became slower each time, stretching like waves themselves, until they were no longer words, but only the feeling of being held. I closed my eyes, and still the rocking continued, not stopping, not fading. Even with sight gone, the motion carried me, I thought, before thought itself dissolved. If the world were a song, this would be its rhythm. If the night were a lullaby, this would be its refrain. And then there was only rocking, only the lull of endless water, steady as breath, vast as time, carrying me deeper into quiet, deeper into rest. Asterisk, the moon had risen fully now, climbing to its quiet throne above the sea. It did not hurry in its rising, just as the whale did not hurry in its swimming, just as I did not hurry in my drifting. Everything moved with the same patience, the same unspoken rhythm that carried the night forward. The light poured gently, not like the sudden blaze of day, but like water spilled slowly across a table, spreading without sound, without edge. Silver touched the whale's back, touched the small boat, touched the rippling surface of the ocean until it seemed the whole world had been brushed with a single soft color. The whale swam on, and wherever it went, the moonlight followed. It shone along the curve of its body, and for a moment it seemed as though the whale itself carried the moon, lifting it gently upon its back. But no, the moon remained where it always was, distant. Untouchably it felt near, so near that I thought I could reach out and place my hand upon it. It is strange, I thought, how something can be both far and close at once. The moon, shining down, seemed at once infinite in its distance and intimate in its companionship. It was not just above MIT, was with me, watching, holding, moving as I moved, did not need to speak, did not need to alter its glow. Its presence was enough. I let my eyes drift across its face, the soft shadows, the pale glow. I had seen it countless times, and yet tonight it seemed new, or perhaps simply more familiar than ever. Like an old friend, one I had never stopped knowing. Even the boat, with its worn wood and quiet creak, seemed smoothed into something timeless, something belonging to the rhythm of this night. I breathed, and the moon breathed with me, or so it felt. Each inhalation seemed to draw in silver, cool and calm. Each exhalation released it back into the air, as though the light and I were part of the same exchange. My breath, the tide, the whale's slow swimming, the moon's gentle glow were separate. All were one motion, one stillness. Time thinned. The minutes stretched wide, so wide they almost ceased to exist. The whale did not change its pace. The boat did not alter its course. The moon did not falter in its glow. Everything held steady, as though the night had decided there was no need for change, no need for anything but presence. The moonlight spilled across the water, and in it I saw not just light, but company. It seemed to say, "You are not alone here. You are part of this." And the words, though never spoken aloud, were enough to still every corner of me. I thought of how the moon has watched over oceans for as long as they have moved, how it has leaned close to every shore, every traveler who has looked up at night. The same light that touched me now had touched them, and those before them, and those before. And so, though I sat in a small boat in the vast sea, I was never truly alone. The moon was here. It had always been here. The whale swam on, its great back shining like obsidian, dusted with silver. The boat drifted after. The sea rocked gently, unbroken. And above it all, the moon remained, patient and whole, a companion who asked for nothing but attention. And even then, not even that, it would shine whether I looked or not. I let the light rest on my face, my hands, my chest. I let it remind me that everything could be softened, everything could be held. The world did not need to rush. The whale did not need to hurry. I did not need to arrive. There was only this: moon above, sea below, silver stretched between, and the quiet companionship that needed no word. I whispered inwardly, so quietly it was barely thought, "Stay," and the moon, in its silence, answered, "I have always been here." The stillness deepened. My body, the boat, the sea, the whale, the stars, the moon, each seemed to breathe together, as though we shared one vast lung, one endless breath. It was a breath without end, without urgency, carrying me further into rest, into the calm that waits when nothing needs to change. And so I drifted, wrapped not only in the sea, but in the light of a companion who was both near and far, both distant and close. The moon watched, the moon held, the moon shone, and in its presence I felt whole, safe, and small in the gentlest way. There was no need for more. There was only the whale, the water, the moon, and me moving together in the hush of night, bathed in silver that would never fade. The whale swam further into the vastness, and I followed, though it felt less like following and more like dissolving into the path it left behind. The sea had now turned fully to midnight, no longer the shifting shades of twilight, no longer a surface between day and night, but something complete, whole, and endless. Deep blue spread in every direction, softened by silver where the moonlight touched. It was as though I had entered a sea that belonged only to this hour, a sea that could not exist at any other time. The whale carried the night upon its back, and the night deepened as it passed. The last traces of dusk had long since faded. The air was cool and heavy with salt, and every sound seemed hushed, as though the world had folded in on itself, closing doors one by one until only this stillness remained. I could no longer tell how long I had been drifting. Minutes, hours, they thinned into one another. The rhythm of time no longer mattered. What mattered was the quiet rise of each wave, the steady weight of the whale's body moving just ahead, the moonlight softening everything into calm. I was not outside of time, yet I was not inside it either. I was somewhere between, held in a space where nothing needed to hurry forward. The boat rocked gently, almost imperceptibly. Each motion felt like the breath of the sea, slow and even, cradling me into a deeper calm. My oars rested inside the boat, untouched, unnecessary. The tide carried me as surely as the whale carried the night. I had surrendered long ago to its rhythm, and now I floated with no resistance, no plan, no destination. I thought of how the sea seemed not just water, but a mirror of something inward. The midnight surface stretched out endlessly, and I felt myself stretching with it. My thoughts grew quieter, not silenced, but softened, as though they too had been touched by moonlight. Each one arrived, lingered a moment, and drifted away like a ripple spreading outward. Nothing clung, nothing pressed. Whale's body rose and fell with the waves. It moved slowly, deliberately, but without effort. I wondered if I too was dissolving into this ocean, no longer separate from its depth, its expanse, its timelessness. The silver above and the blue below met in a single horizon that seemed to circle endlessly. There was no edge to the night, no boundary I could see or name. It was not frightening, it was freeing, like breathing out after holding breath too long. The more I drifted, the more I felt myself entering the quiet center of something vast, the center of the night, the center of the sea, the center of myself. I closed my eyes, and the darkness was not different from what lay around me. Behind my eyelids, I saw the same midnight blue, the same soft shimmer of light, the same calm expanse without walls. It was all the same sea within me, around me, carrying me further. Time, if it still moved like a slow, Titan hurried, patient, without need to measure itself. My heartbeat slowed to match it. My breath lengthened until it felt as though I had always been breathing this way. Inhale cool, salt-tinged night. Exhale release, surrender, quiet. Again and again, until I was no longer separate from the rhythm, but part of it. The whale sang no song now. It moved in silence, carrying the night across the sea, as it always had, as it always would. I thought, perhaps, this whale had carried night since before I was born, and would continue long after. It was not bound to any one moment. Its motion was eternal, unbroken. A lullaby written not in sound but in presence. As I drifted deeper into this midnight sea, I felt something loosen inside me. The tightness of hours, of days, of things once needed and remembered, they began to fall away gently, like leaves settling on still water. What remained was the quiet center of being, simple and whole. The sea cradled me, the whale led me, the moon kept watch. I was not outside of time, yet I had no need for it. There was only this, the endless sea of midnight, blue and silver, carrying me further inward, further still, until even the word further seemed unnecessary. There was no distance, no destination. There was only rest. The horizon circled endlessly, but it was not a boundary, it was an invitation. And so I drifted on, breath by breath, wave by wave, carried not forward, but deeper, into the heart of the night, into the quiet center where nothing hurried, nothing asked, nothing needed. And in that stillness, I felt myself entering, fully, and without hesitation, the midnight sea. The whale slowed. Its vast body rose higher, then settled gently upon the surface of the sea, as though it too needed to rest. No longer moving forward, no longer pulling the night deeper across the horizon, simply flowed, dark and immense, like an island born of the midnight itself. I let my boat drift closer, though I did not row, nor did I need to. The tide seemed to understand. It carried me softly until I found myself near enough to feel the quiet presence of the whale's stillness. It breathed, that was all. A slow, deep breath that lifted its back ever so slightly, as though the ocean itself was rising. With it, then a long, unhurried exhale, warm mist curling into the night air before dissolving into silver moonlight. Each breath sounded like the sea, remembering how to rest. I matched my breathing to it, without meaning to. Inhales, low, deep, filling. Exhale, long, drifting, releasing. Again and again, until there was no distinction between my lungs and the vast lungs of the whale, between the air in my chest and the breath of the ocean. We were both held by the same rhythm. The water was so calm that it seemed to have fallen asleep. Small ripples shimmered around the whale, spreading outward in circles that caught the moonlight and faded into stillness again. The surface reflected both sky and sea, and for a moment I felt suspended in a place without edges. Above, stars. Below, stars. Between them, the whale and I, breathing together. There was no song now, no movement, no lanterns rising from the depths. Only pause, a vast, unbroken pause that spread wider than the horizon, deeper than the ocean floor. The night did not ask for anything. It did not demand motion or thought. It simply allowed. I closed my eyes, and the stillness entered me like water soaking into dry earth. I felt the rocking of the boat become the rocking of my own body, the cradle of the sea, holding me just as it held the whale. In that quiet, I thought of how rarely the world paused. Always there was something moving, something pressing forward. Yet here was proof that even the largest being could rest, could float, could simply breathe. The whale exhaled again, mist, drifting upward in a shimmer that caught a trace of moonlight before vanishing. That moment so brief, so delicate seemed infinite, as if the night itself was breathing through the whale, as if the entire sky leaned close to listen. I let the silence fill me. It was not empty. It was vast and alive, carrying the soft weight of presence. In silence, I could feel the heartbeat of the sea, the subtle hum beneath the surface, the gentle creak of wood against water, the faint whisper of air against skin. None of it hurried. None of it asked me to hurry either. The whale did not move. Its eye small compared to its body, yet deep as a well of stars, gleamed faintly when the moonlight touched it. I thought perhaps it was looking at me, though it did not matter if it was. Its gaze, whether turned outward or inward, carried the same calm. It was the gaze of something that knew how to belong to stillness without question. The night stretched on, but I no longer marked it by time. It was measured only in breaths. Inhale, exhale. The whale breathed. I breathed. The sea breathed. That was enough. I leaned back in the boat, letting my head rest against the worn wood. Above me, the sky seemed endless, yet gentle. Stars pulsed faintly as though they too had slowed their rhythm. Even the moon, high and watchful, appeared softened, not distant but near, a quiet companion who needed no words. For the first time, I felt no sense of journey. There was nowhere to go. The whale rested, I rested, the sea rested, the night itself rested. Everything paused, and in that pause, everything was whole. The whale exhaled once more, and the mist lingered a little longer before fading. The air smelled faintly sweeter, as though touched by something beyond salt and water. I breathed it in and let it move through me, letting it settle deep inside. The thought came, gentle as a ripple. Perhaps rest is not the absence of movement, but its own kind of journey, a journey inward, to the place where all motion begins and ends. Here, in this stillness, there was no need to arrive. I was already where I needed to be. The whale floated like an island of night. I drifted nearby like a smaller, quieter shadow, and between us stretched the silence of the sea, vast and tender, holding us both in the same calm. And so we remained breathing, resting, sharing the peace of a world that had, for a time, forgotten how to hurry. The longer I drifted beside the whale, the more the stillness began to loosen the edges of my body. The boat rocked, the sea breathed, the night stretched vast and endless sand slowly. I could no longer tell where I ended and the world began. The line of the boat blurred first, its wooden edges softened against the water, as though it was no longer built of planks and nails, but of tide and air. When I laid my hand upon its side, I could not feel where wood became sea or where sea became air. Everything was flowing into everything else, each shape leaning into the next until boundaries thinned like mist. I breathed again, slowly, following the rhythm of the whale. My breath no longer felt mine alone. The air that filled me had drifted over the ocean, swept around the moon, moved through the deep lungs of the whale, and now it moved through me too. One breath, shared, carried from sky to sea, from sea to me. Above, the stars shimmered gently, their reflections trembling on the surface of the water. I gazed at them until I could not be sure whether I was looking upward or downward. Sky and sea mirrored one another so perfectly that I felt suspended between two infinities, both equally real, both equally endless. A thought flickered, though it did not feel like thought, more like memory. Perhaps I was not between two skies at all. Perhaps I was part of both, stretched thin like starlight across water, belonging to each without division. The whale rested nearby, its body gleaming with constellations. As I watched, I felt its vastness leaning gently toward me, not pressing, not demanding, but welcoming. It was as though its stillness opened a doorway. My awareness slipped closer, and for a moment I could feel not only my breath, but its breath, too slow, deep, steady. Each exhale spread across my chest as though I were the one exhaling. Each inhale expanded inside me as though the whale had borrowed my lungs. We breathed together, and the boundary between us dissolved. Its stardusted skin shimmered, and I felt the shimmer move across my own. It did not matter that I was small, and it was immense. The difference seemed to fall away like a garment no longer needed. We were two forms, yes, but one stillness. The night seemed to notice. The stars above leaned closer, their light softening into something more intimate, as though they too wished to blur the distance. One by one, they brightened, spilling faint trails of silver mist that drifted downward. The mist did not fall to the sea, nor rise to the sky. It spread everywhere, weaving through the air like threads of breath. I felt those threads touch my skin, and then pass through me as though I were made of air myself. My arms, my hands, my breath, my thoughts, all of it loosened, all of it softened. I was not dissolving into nothing. I was becoming part of everything. The whale shimmered again, its great back shining as though dusted with galaxies. I closed my eyes, and still I saw them not only above me, not only upon the whale, but inside me, too. Constellations stirred behind my closed eyelids, swimming through me like silver fish. I carried a sky within, as the whale carried one across its skin, as the sea carried one across its surface. I was no longer certain of where I floated, in the boat, in the whale, in the night, all three at once, perhaps. The sea cradled me, but so did the stars. The whale rested near, but also within. The night stretched vast, but also lived inside my chest. Time dissolved. Hours, minutes, moments, they slipped away, indistinguishable from the tide. There was only rhythm, the rhythm of breath, the rhythm of rocking, the rhythm of starlight, spreading across water, I thought. Or perhaps I remembered, or perhaps I dreamed. We are not separate from the night. We are not passengers upon it. We are the night. Its darkness is our stillness. Its stars are our memories. Its tides are our breathing. The whale, the sea, the moon, myself, different notes, perhaps, but all part of the same song. And with that realization, I no longer tried to hold on to shape. My body became as wide as the horizon, as deep as the sea, as luminous as the stars. When the moonlight touched the water, I felt it upon my skin. When the tide moved beneath the whale, I felt it in my bones. When the stars trembled above, I trembled too, shining faintly in answer. The night held me, and I held the night. There was no end, no beginning, only belonging. The whale rested, and I rested. The sea breathed, and I breathed. The stars shone, and I shone. Slowly, gently, the boundaries fell away until there was only one vast, quiet, stillnessless, tender, infinite. And in that stillness, I was no longer only myself. I was part of the night. Asterisk, the whale lingered at the surface, still and immense, as though it were an island of starlight resting upon the sea. For a long while, nothing moved. Only the moonlight drifted. Only the water breathed. Then, gently, the whale began to sink. Not a dive, not a disappearance, only a slow, quiet descent. The night seemed to follow it, drawn down into the deep, as though the whale carried the sky itself upon its back. I watched as its dark shape blurred, its shimmer softening into the silver water. Stars slipped from its body and scattered, dissolving into the waves. Each shimmer fell more faintly than the last. Each moment stretched longer. Each breath became slower. I remained on the surface. The boat floated without sound, without weight. I felt no urge to move, no need to follow. The whale carried the night downward. I stayed above, wrapped in moonlight. The sea was calm. The sky was calm. I was calm. The whale sank deeper, and with it went the vastness of the night. The horizon softened. The stars grew fewer until the world became smaller, gentler, quieter. I breathed in. I breathed out. Breath and silence. Breath and silence. Thoughts thinned. They no longer stretched wide, no longer wandered far. They curled inward, small as whispers, faint as dew. The boat rocked. The water rocked. I rocked too. The whale was gone now, hidden beneath the sea. But I did not feel its absence. Its rhythm lingered, as though the sea itself remembered. Above, the moon glowed. It did not waver. It did not fade. It simply shone. I let my eyes rest upon it. Its light covered me like a blanket, cool and soft. It asked for nothing. It offered everything. The sea breathed. I breathed. The world was only this, only light, only water, only breath, only stillness. The whale had carried the night into the deep, and now the surface was bare and bright. The moonlight wrapped me, cradled me, held me steady. I closed my eyes. The rocking continued. The breathing continued. The stillness continued. Everything slowed. Everything softened. Everything hushed. The whale was gone. The night was gone. But the peace remained. I drifted and drifted and drifted until there was nothing to do but rest. I lay back in the boat, the wood beneath me cool and steady, the sea rocking me with its endless rhythm. My body softened against the curve of the boards, shoulders sinking, arms loosening, legs stretching without effort. I felt the water cradling me, not only beneath the boat, but beneath my whole being, as though I, too, floated upon the vast and endless sea. The air was cool. carrying the faintest scent of salt and moonlit water. Each breath I drew came slowly, without thought, as though the world itself breathed for me, in and out, rising and falling. My chest matched the rhythm of the waves, each inhale a tide, each exhale a gentle retreat. I let my eyes close. At first, behind them, the shapes of stars lingered, faint after-images of the sky I had watched so long. But even they began to dissolve, scattering into quiet, leaving only the softness of darkness. The night had no edges now. The world had no edges now. I felt myself floating deeper into stillness, muscles unknotted, loosening one by one, until I could not tell where my body ended and where the sea began. My hands rested like petals. My feet were weightless. My face, cooled by air, eased into calm. The moonlight touched me still, even with my eyes closed. I could feel it, a silver hush across my skin, as though the night itself was a blanket drawn lightly over me. It pressed down in no way, only softened, only soothed. I breathed again and again, each breath slower, lighter, easier. Thoughts that had followed me through the hours of night now grew faint, their voices thinning to murmurs, then to silence. I felt them drift away, like feathers carried on the tide, until there was nothing left but breath and the sound of the sea. The sea rocked me gently, endlessly, without pause. I did not need to hold myself, did not need to steer, did not need to rise. The water carried me, the night carried me, the moon carried me. Even the memory of the whale lingered only as a rhythm, a deep calm in the waves, a steady presence below. I did not need to see it now. Its song was gone, but its peace remained. Breath and sea and stillness. My mind grew softer, my body grew softer. I was weightless, I was held. The edges of thought blurred, the edges of the world blurred, even the edges of self blurred, until I was only drifting, only resting, only breathing. I let go. I surrendered. I allowed myself to be carried. The boat rocked, the water rocked, I rocked to everywhere. The world hushed, everywhere the world stilled. The sea beneath me, endless. The moon above me, endless. My rest within me, endless. I was no longer separate from the night. I was within it. I was part of it. Everything hushed, breath and stillness and peace. Everything is still. Everything is safe. I am carried. I am at rest.